Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Industry Insights, the esports talk show that hopes to give you a little bit of insight into the esports industry. This week, joining us is a legend of Dota 2 commentary, Mr. Toby Dawson, aka TobiWan himself. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Look at that gorgeous smile, that professional headset. It's obviously a professional in the industry.
Yeah,
I'm doing great,
indeed.
man. I'm doing great.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you on. I know that there's a lot of people, especially that want to get into esports casting, that are going to be really interested in what you have to say in terms of the career advice a little bit later on. But before we get there, I just wanted to do a little bit more of a personal introduction to allow people to get to know you a little bit more. So why don't you just introduce yourself to everybody watching?
No, I always call myself like the veteran of esports. There's a bunch of us out there, I think, who actually have the tags because we've kind of been around since esports wasn't actually a thing and started very early on. So, like, my first taste of esports was back in 2003 when I played my
Mhm.
first Call of Duty vanilla match on an Australian ladder. And that's kind of where I began. And the road's been very interesting and curves a lot of different ways, especially through Southeast Asia. And then resulting in me getting a full time job in 2011 in Europe. That was working for a company called Freaks for You Gaming, GBMH, GmbH, GmbH. Uh, I always got in in trouble for not pronouncing their full title of Freaks for You Gaming because they're different from Freaks for You.
Ah, right.
Anyway,
I see.
so I tried to give him the full dues right there. Shout out to Michael Hainish if he ever tunes into this podcast, who is the leader of that group. Yeah, so I got my first full time job there working with Join Dota. So we were building up a big community portal, doing coverage for events, running events, doing the whole shebang,
Mhm.
until I moved to London and kind of just moved on to independent kind of life, working on a couple of things here and there, trying to see where I can be more than a caster. And life is still being a caster and still doing some other things to try and be more than a caster too.
Yeah, so try on the vein of trying to be a bit more than a caster. Obviously, that is what you're principally known for in Dota 2 and your work around it in that space. What is some of the other work that you're doing in esports at the moment?
So some stuff I've tried to do has been cryptocurrency at one point.
Right?
That went very interesting. Like the whole idea was making sure that those who have something of value in the community can actually make that value into a product, into make it something that's deliverable to people. Um, that kind of didn't go the way we wanted, but it still has this strong undertone of like you got to believe in the people who are coming up in this industry to shape what the industry will become. If you try and say like I'm going to control this industry and I'm going to be the one who creates the direction for it, then you're kind of a little delusional in your own grandeur. I prefer to look at the next generation and putting more time into them. So one of the big things I'm working on is something called FSG Academy, which is all about making sure that the next generation has the resources they need to actually succeed in this industry. Which is something which is difficult. Not everyone knows where they can find resources or find even a path into esports because I definitely didn't know
Yeah.
mine when I first began. But that was a different time. That was a long, long time ago.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is space for some more resources to be created in esports, and I think that some people are certainly crying out for them, and I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about that later on. In terms of what you like to do in your free time, Toby, what are some of the games that you enjoy playing in your free time?
And you have to tell me what this thing called free time is. Uh, my daughter was born about 3 months ago, so we haven't had
Right.
a lot of free time. And between like trying to rebuild and cast from home, uh, as well as then trying to run the education development, like the development of the platform, and a couple of other things on the side. Like it's you don't have a lot of time, and then like you still want to be able to make sure you have touch with reality, which maybe right now in the current state of the world, maybe you don't want a full touch of that reality because it gets depressing on many fronts. Um, but maybe there is like. Yeah, some free time I get, but even then I have to. It's kind of going to be dedicated to playing the game that I that I cast. So I
Yeah.
most of my time I spend playing Dota if I have some free time.
Yeah, I can imagine needing to keep up on all of the patches and updates and something can be quite a task that you've got to keep on top of in the Dota 2
Yeah,
space
yeah.
as well.
In this genre, you can't just flit in and flit out. Like it doesn't work that way. Like there's too much to know. Like if you had to go to a stage and cast Guitar Hero, then sure, great, fantastic. Like as long as you know the basics of the game, like it's all showmanship at that point. But a game which is so heavily based around like knowledge, like the knowledge gap is huge for players.
Yeah.
You can't let your gap spread further and further apart. You can let your skill gap spread further and further apart, but you can't let your knowledge.
Yeah, and yeah, at that point in time, you're going to be in serious trouble trying to explain what on earth is going on the screen if you've got no idea. I imagine so.
Hmm.
A little bit of a difficult position to be in as a caster from that respect. So, the final question for our sort of personal introduction for you, Toby, as somebody who works on a lot of esports broadcasts as a caster, what are some of your favorite events to sit back and watch as a viewer?
Um, that's a good question. Because I find it actually difficult to watch events,
Hmm.
mainly because it's like once you understand what happens behind the scenes, it's difficult to not be very critical
Yeah.
of what you see. So sometimes the best events are the ones that you just get like soaked up in the immersion. And there's only a few events that really do that for me these days. I think actually like maybe like the only ESL event which I'm like, man, that was just really cool through and through. Is like IEM Sydney, which I
Hmm.
think is going to Melbourne now. If it gets to Melbourne, the CS events in Australia, because it's all about the show, it's all about the entertainment, because the
Yeah.
crowd makes it so, the talent really ride with it, and so do the production. As opposed to cookie cutters, which are just a little bit more generic, and then that's when you start saying like, that break shouldn't have been that long, like all the crappy crap. Um, Anything which is like actually changing the game of broadcasting. I find we play events is
Hmm.
something that a lot of people should look at for the way they try and combine augmented reality into their production. This is something that becomes interesting, and I watch highlights of worlds just because I think when it comes to the show, when it comes to like something which is clickable, like that
Hmm.
is shareable, Worlds always seems to nail it. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, now we've got we've got what K-pop, like not just there, but they're able to take their really strong branded characters and also then combine it into that world.
Yeah.
uh it's great. Like you're always finding like content like that from events flagging up on social media for people that aren't even in that scene, and that for me is interesting. When I see something like that pop up, if like someone's done something so interesting that for someone that doesn't follow any League of Legends, it pops up on my network feed, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go check this out. No, you had a dragon fly around a stadium. Awesome.
Yeah, they definitely do an amazing job at putting on the show on those League of Legends events, and as well with the augmented reality at the international and stuff as well. I think that you can hit such a high production threshold in esports that I'm really excited to see where we go in the future. And before we look at the future, we are going to take a little bit look back at your journey through the esports industry, Toby. But before we do that, ladies and gentlemen, remember this is a Q&A show. So if you do have any questions that you want Toby to answer at the end, make sure you get those in chat now so that we can read them out at the end of the show. So, Toby, you mentioned earlier on that your first experiences in esports were at those Call of Duty events really early on. What was esports sort of like back in those days, and what were some of your experiences in that time?
I don't think you could really describe esports as esports, not to someone
Hmm.
that sees esports the way it currently is. Like esports was literally just a group of mates that would play against each other, and you would find yourself banded together on IRC or some kind of website portal. That's it. Like there was nothing more to it. Like there's no endorsement.
Yeah.
Hell, I almost lost my crap when I had a keyboard sent to my home, and I'm like, oh, I've made it as an esports player. Like that was really the pinnacle of what you'd be able to achieve in Australian esports. And you could look to the American scenes who burnt so much money on, I think it was called the CPL.
Hmm.
Like just the Counter Strike events there. It's like, wow, that's really cool. And they were trying different things, and then you realize it wasn't sustainable then. Um,
Yeah.
and that for me was just like I'm watching all this unfold from down in Australia. It's like, man, at least we're stable down here. And it was really just like a lower level of competition. Like I was able
Yeah.
to win grand finals and events playing on my shitty ass computer, which enabled me to have. I think I had like on, and this is an FPS. I was able to have 15 FPS, 15 frames
Nice.
coming through, while everyone else is playing on like 60 or 80. Obviously, this is a while ago, so like those kind of like FPS numbers, people like you couldn't even crack 100. But that's what it was back then. And I was also on
Yeah.
Australian like dial-up internet, which was also just horrendously bad. It's like, so what do you like? Competition was so different back then. Like when I first started doing LAN events, and I'm like, oh, so this is what no latency feels like. This is what a real PC actually feels like. Just a very, very different world back then that really, it's difficult to have anyone really comprehend what it was like
Yeah.
without saying, like, go into the crappiest LAN event that happens in your community. And that was esports. Like, and it could be a real crappy LAN event now to say that's what esports was back then.
Well, you never know. Maybe if you return to the grassroots, you might see some of the old school style events on offer. And with
I'm sorry,
everything,
unless you managed to blow out the power board of a church, like you haven't worked out the issues.
yeah.
Like we actually I remember like there was this great story of like one of the first LAN events in Brisbane that was run called LAN Smash.
Hmm.
And I think they like one of their first venues was a church, and that's when they found out that every single plug that was in the church hall was all on the same circuit.
Right.
So one went down, everything went down. Um, and you couldn't just spread the load. It's like putting powerboard on powerboard on powerboard on
Yeah.
powerboard on powerboard. And everyone's brought their rigs in, which like took a fair chunk of power, especially with CRTs being lugged up as well. You're like, oh, okay, yep. And everything just blew up. It wasn't until we started using like Olympic Stadium, we started using the QE2 Stadium, which had power sockets running through the floorboards. It's like, all right, now you have a home. Now you can actually do things.
Yeah, and well, yeah, you're not going to get much done in a LAN environment without any power anyway. So
No,
as
you
long as all the
don't.
computers are actually running. When you were at those LAN events, in the church and all the power's blowing out and it's finally progressing and things like that, were you sat around thinking that it was always an environment that you wanted to work in?
No. Quite simply. Like when I first started like wanting to get into gaming, like I knew gaming was always my passion and esports was something I did and I loved the competitive nature of it. I was always a
Hmm.
very competitive person. But I actually wanted to get into game design at the very beginning. Then found out that I really sucked with math and code language. So I'm like, well, that blows that, and I
Yeah.
can't even draw stick figures correctly. So I'm like, well, there goes that. Um, it's not like we had all the tools of Unreal that you could learn on these days, which makes things a lot more nicer. And I could have been an environmental artist if that happened. So yeah, I never really planned to like get involved so heavily into esports.
Hmm.
Originally, I actually wanted to be a teacher. I did a diploma of community services and children's services and a bachelor of education early childhood.
All right.
So my plan was to actually be a primary school teacher, um, and that kind of failed. When passion distracts and when laziness kicks in, your grades massively drop and depression strikes, and then you're like, well, why the hell am I still here? And that question was finally asked of me by one of the people in my cohort, and I'm like, you know what? I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. It's like, well, why don't you do what you actually care about? I'm like, I'm going to gaming, and
Yeah.
that was it. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people obviously do get involved in the gaming sector because it's what they've wanted to do. I don't think I've met anybody yet trying to get into esports because because for any other reason other than it's their absolute passion. I've not met anyone that's just like, oh, I've got to get into that esports. It's terrible, but the money's brilliant and it's a brilliant industry to be in. So,
you've got to get involved in the business cycles. Then you'll find a lot of those people who are like, "Mwah, I hear there's money. Did you have a buzzword for me? Oh, do you have a second buzzword for me? Oh, here's my latest numbers from Yuzu. Yes, we'll make a lot of cash together."
yeah, indeed. And well, that's potentially some of the people you might want to be avoiding. Everybody watching as we head further into
They have their
esports.
uses, those people, because
Yeah.
those people, if you can find them and then educate them on some good qualities of esports, like
Hmm.
get them to connect in some way, then it's good because you need people
Yeah,
that speak a business language. If you have
yeah,
people that only speak gamer language, you're going to get absolutely nowhere because you'll always be a member of the community and you won't be able to understand
yeah.
what it takes to run a business. That's why I think my partner is like the best because she played World of Warcraft, and so she understands like a lot of the gaming world. But I what makes her so amazing is like it's the business mindset that comes first.
Yeah.
Uh, then it's the understanding of the gaming world, and I can go, oh, but isn't this really important? Like think of the people who play, and she's like, well, think of the people who actually want to earn money. It's like, huh, huh, hmm. The two views don't always match up.
Yeah, indeed. And you're always going to need those business people as well to come along because you need the endemic brands to come across at some point, right? You need that growth in the industry. It has to get out of the church eventually. And you don't really tend to do that unless you can have the capital to scale up. So
Yeah.
um, that's where those kind of minds would be necessary. And now I want to talk a little bit more about your career, Toby. So when you first started looking at getting into casting, was it always play-by-play casting that you wanted to do?
No, I was an expert caster.
Oh,
I,
right.
I guess I played COD professionally.
Sure.
Professionally back in 2003. I played COD professionally, so like I was the captain of my team. I'd call out strats, and I'd actually be pretty brutal
Mhm.
for the way I'd review people. Like you think Simon Cowell was pretty rough, like I was a little rougher. Um, and like it was only like a couple of us who would do it at the start, so I kind of had to do both. But most of the time, we were just talking through the scenarios. Like they've got to change their timing. They're missing guns. They're missing this. Like get a little hyped about some things, which is great. But most of the time, I was actually breaking it down. Play by play is something I kind of just found myself getting into as I kind of loosened up over
Mhm.
time. And it was more about just the excitement factor for me, the entertainment, and like I still like to blend in knowledge, but when I went to Dota, I'm like, I'm never gonna have enough knowledge to be an analyst. Um,
Yeah.
so I was very happy just to say, like, yeah, I'm just a play by play guy, but maybe a little too much of that in the early years.
Do you remember how the casting started? How it transitioned from being the professional to breaking things down on the broadcasts?
Um, when I first started, like I joined a group called GameStar, and they had their procedures and their scripting, and like they had a how to guide at the
Mhm.
start. So when you begin, it's just like, all right, so introduction, say your name, say the name of the two teams playing, say the tournament you're in, talk about the state of where talk about the if it's group stage. And the funny thing is, you do that all in one paragraph. It's like, so welcome to Industry Insights Tournament. I'm TobiWan. You're now going to watch Team A play up against Team B in the quarterfinal matchup at the winners bracket. A lot on the line, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
and and you realize that when you start doing that, it's like, yeah, you kind of hit this professional tone that you find with mainstream sports. But when you follow a script that heavily, you're never really going to make it in esports, mainly because it's too rigid, it's too stale. Like
Mhm.
that'll work for you in mainstream media because that's kind of the world they work on. They work on these heavy scripting and like planned jokes and other things. Um, but you can always thank a guy like Sean, day nine, for this. Like he was the first person to change the mindset, I think, of a lot of casters, including myself,
Mhm.
where starting off with specific catchphrase into condition one, condition two, condition three, moving through step by step, like you realize just how boring you are and how little of your personality can shine through. Where if you just stick to like, it's like having a conversation with someone. If all they talk about is interesting points, it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But if someone's like, well, we've now started this conversation, I am me, this is the weather, um, this is the color of the ground. It's like, well, this isn't interesting.
Yeah.
Like, why are we talking about these things? Why is this coming up? Like, jump straight into the interesting. Because if you flit away like the attention span of especially the current audience, like a YouTube video you watch for what 3, 4, 5 seconds, and maybe at best, um, before if you're not interested, you've turned it off.
Yeah.
Like, why do you think people are starting to do like sponsored by Skillshare in the middle of their videos now?
Yeah.
Like, it's no longer at the start. People are working this stuff out bit by bit with each type of content that you create. And sometimes it's nice to set the scene. Um, but I found like with a lot of the times, like the scene is kind of already set because people are already tuning in. So you
Hmm.
capture their attention, and why burn like interesting talking points like where we are at the tournament within just one paragraph?
Yeah.
Like it's a waste of material. It's a waste of interesting topics. And maybe you're doing it because you don't actually have something interesting to say. At which point you've got to review your own prep for this. Like, do you want to spend 2 hours creating a script, or do you actually want to spend like 2 hours finding interesting facts that can be brought up, that then create discussion points from themselves?
Yeah, I do think that the preparation point is one that people who are looking into getting into casting work don't perhaps realize. And I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about that when we do a deep dive of what it's like to be a caster a little bit later on. And to just finish up talking about your career personally, Toby, when you started doing the casting, you start getting involved in Dota 2. When does it start looking like actually you can make a full time career out of this stuff?
It really didn't, ever. I, like it wasn't until I got hired by the German company that I thought I could actually do this full time because it just wasn't
Hmm.
money. Like I could, I got get. So in 2009,
Hmm.
I was offered a job in Southeast Asia, um, which would last for 3 months. It would be in the Philippines. Um, and after that 3 months, that was it. Like maybe it would come back, but maybe it wouldn't. And I'm like, well, that's not a
Yeah.
full time job, and I'm not going to pick up my entire life in Australia for these 3 months and then have to move back in with my mum. Like
Yeah.
that would be the scenario if things fell apart. I was like, well, that's just horrendous. Um, so yeah, I kind of waited out, and for a short period of time, I actually really just wanted to build my own thing. So we had this website called Cybergamer, which was a fantastically networked ladder system and community back in Australia, and we created something actually with a guy called Craig Warren called Cybergamer TV. And Cybergamer TV, we would basically cover anything and everything.
Hmm.
And if we probably kept working on that, like we would have a huge coverage hub that would work from Australia. But there wasn't money. There wasn't
Yeah.
money in broadcasting. Like if like this was before the days of Twitch TV,
Hmm.
before revenue share on streams. Whenever you did a video stream, you had to pay for the bandwidth that was consumed. When you do an audio stream, you have to pay for the bandwidth that was consumed. If you had a website, you have to pay for the bandwidth that was consumed. Like these are all the things that like you just had to like take into account, and you had to keep up with technology. We were running 3 PCs in order to do just one stream. Now I can do it from my home with just my graphics card's power.
Yeah.
I don't even need anything else thanks to the latest patches that came through. Um, and it's just a completely different time. Like I invested so much of my money into that and my life. Like I was working a 40-hour work week at a retail store for gaming, a place called JB Hi-Fi. And then I would come home, and this would be like 6:30. I would like scoff down some food, and then I'd jump on and I'd cast Australian Dota or Australian COD or whatever else we had queued up. Uh, Southeast Asian stuff would then be on because Australia's a couple of hours
Hmm.
ahead. So then we bounce into Southeast Asian coverage.
Hmm.
Then 3 a.m. would come around, and would bounce into European coverage. Um,
Yeah.
and I would do that until probably 6 a.m. I'd go to sleep for about 2 hours, if I got that much. And then I would wake up and go to my job. And and on days off, I would just sleep as much as I possibly could. And that was it. That was my life. Like people always like mock me for my panda eyes. But when you do that kind of crap to your body, like it doesn't leave your body. You don't
Yeah.
catch up on all that sleep. Um, so it's pretty brutal in the early days. There wasn't a lot of support structures that there is these days.
Hmm.
You really had to make your own career uh, in the early start at the start.
Yeah, and I'm noticing that a lack of sleep perhaps is a common theme throughout your career at this point, Toby.
Yeah, it didn't get any better once it became a full-time job because then I'm like, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
could do this full time. And I basically lived in my studio. Like
Nice.
anything and everything had to be cast. That was my mindset, and I was working nonstop, and diet didn't improve, and yeah, put on like since I left Australia, Like I put on like, I think it was like 25 kg in
Impressive.
my 6 or 7 years I was in Berlin. Luckily I've managed to knock off about well, actually, I moved to England, to Leicester, and I put on another 5 kg because I worked out you can get English breakfast delivered to your door.
Oh
Like, oh
dear.
god, no! I put on so much weight. So technically, I lost that 5 kg when I came in London, and then I lost another 15 after that. But yeah, it's all getting to actually having a balanced life when you do
Mhm.
things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's obviously the key to working everything out. So, when you were sat around grinding these hours out, doing this coverage, doing this casting, at what point in your career did you start to look for work outside of commentary? When did you realize that you wanted to do a little bit more work just outside of event coverage?
Um, So I kind of always wanted to do work outside of event coverage. I I kind of liked the idea of like the community portal building that we did with Join Dota, the tournaments that we were always running. I spent a lot of time as well with volunteers of the original Join Dota team. Like we would play things like Titanfall and whatever else like was interesting at the time. We played Dota games together. It was a very social group. Um, and one of the big things that always came back was like what do the volunteers get out of this? Like, what do you get for volunteering on a platform?
Hmm.
And the answer was really nothing. Like
Yeah.
spending time with me, like that's not value for the future. Um, like there needed to be something more than that. So I always kind of like had in my mindset that we could build more, or I could do more. I didn't know what I could do, so a lot of the time I just internalized it towards like what I could do in Join Dota,
Yeah.
like how I could be part of that team. At one point, I actually put my hand up to actually run the thing after we had Moritz leave us, and we went through a different manager every couple of months, and the direction of the site just kind of was spiraling out of control. Someone would come in, have an idea, and never follow through with it. And I was like, it was actually heartbreaking in a lot of ways. And I'd try and step up, and they'd be like, "You don't have the experience to do this. Like, we're going to
Hmm.
watch you this entire way. Like, we're not going to let one of our big prize projects like this." It's just like, I just so many conditions around like actually getting things done, and that's when I was like, maybe I can just do something myself.
Yeah.
I never knew what to really do. Um, I I didn't actually have a vision for anything because I didn't know what was really possible. I didn't know where I could read about what was possible. And anything which I thought might be possible, I thought was too expensive for me, living on a pretty low salary.
Hmm.
And the money I did have, like, like it didn't last. Like my entire
Yeah.
time living in Germany, I think the maximum amount of money I had in my bank account was 10,000 euro. I never had more than that.
Yeah.
I had no savings at all. It was actually pretty shitty. Because a lot of the money was just tied up, waiting to be paid. Like, but
Yeah.
it was a really stable career because I got a monthly salary, which is more than most people got at the time.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, anyway, it didn't allow me to have like investment money I could put into something, which was a bit of a shame. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it was kind of sad on that front.
Yeah, a tough situation to be in, in that perspective, unfortunately. But thankfully, through it now, and we are where we are, and you're able to talk to me and help give advice to aspiring members of the esports community. Speaking of which, there are obviously going to be a few aspiring casters watching this at the moment, so
Hmm.
we wanted to ask a little bit about briefly, what are some steps at the moment that aspiring casters can take to get into the industry? We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the attributes that they might want, or some of the best practices, but perhaps what are some of the steps that they can take, some of the things they can start doing, right now if they wanted to begin their journey as an esports caster.
Okay, so I get this question a lot. And even like we can go into later on like specific skills which are good to hone
Hmm.
and different things to do which will improve your odds. But at the end of the day, like a commentator is very much uh it's a celebrity position. Like it's not something like you can train for forever on it, like be a Shakespearean actor and then still go to a movie and not get the gig.
Yeah.
because it doesn't suit you or whatever, whatever, whatever. Like you need a big break or something like this. And a lot of the time, like you also need to have like an abundance of talent to get things done. And like in the early days, I think actually what was it? Like so I remember this for musical theater when I was making the big decision to like where I wanted to go with my life. And I had like a musical theater was a huge part of my life. And I had the choice of I going into that. I'm like, well, am I strong enough? And I remember
Hmm.
someone telling me, it's like, okay, so there's three key areas when you go into musical theater that will get you something. One is your ability to sing. The second is your ability to dance. And your third is the ability to act. Now, in the original days, you can just have one of those.
Yeah.
And that would probably be enough to get by. You could just bluff the other two. But as there's more and more people vying for the same positions, I need to now know how to sing. And now I need to know how to dance. And now I need to also be prepared to be able to act. I need to do all three of these things. I need to do two of these things bloody well right now. And the other one, I can do pretty well.
Hmm.
But think that the competition is going to get harder and harder and harder. And you ask yourself, like, do I have everything that I need in order to actually be a commentator? So being a commentator, okay, voice. You can start at voice. Okay, do you have a voice, accent, like these types of things that make you like really interesting for someone to listen to for hours on end? First question. Um, the second question is going to be like, okay, so what's the next part? Okay, a lot of commentators now need to actually understand games in heavy detail. Do I have
Hmm.
an analytical mind? And do I have the ability to actually express that analytical mind in a way which can be consumed? And do I have a thing like how I do this? Like, you look at someone like if we look at Dota examples, you could look at a guy like Purge. Like, he is not the best analytical mind in Dota. But what he does do is he break things down to their basic elements to then rebuild them up into a way which is explainable for anyone. This is his thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, can you do that as well? Then you got to think about personality. Like, is your personality now going to be strong enough? Because it's not enough to just go on and do your job as a caster and then just piss off. Uh, like brands get, like tournaments get exposure based off the brands that attend. So they're looking for teams, but they're also looking for commentators. They're looking for panel members, looking for any kind of talent that has a social pull, that has a personal pull. Like, people will get their bums in the seat so they can meet you. Like, that's what they're looking for. That's why they hire different people at different times as well.
Yeah.
Because if you have the same people coming time and time again, it's like, I'm not going to go and attend this ESL one because I've met Toby like 5 times. But maybe I want to meet Owen. I want to meet OD Pixel. All right, yeah.
Yeah.
OD Pixel got hired this time around. All right, I'm definitely going. Like, that's you got to think of like these different allures, and it's not as simple as like musical theater where there's three things. There's more and more things coming. So when you first start, ask yourself like, do you have talent in these areas? Is this actually the thing for you? Because you can study as much as you want, but if you don't have the talent, you can live your life as probably a tier two caster. It's happening for a lot of people where they actually have almost no talent whatsoever, but because they grind, because they get themselves in, they're able to get these positions. They get these relationships which keep them where they are. But eventually, someone will have more talent than you and they will overshine you. It's kind of the same thing for most industries anyway. But you need to at least have a good running start, and just be honest with yourself. Like screw the like screw the tips that everyone gives you at the beginning. Like, if you're not honest with yourself, if you're living in a delusional world, sure, you can have some confidence, but you're not going to get anywhere. Uh, you need to actually understand you can do the job and do it properly.
Yeah, indeed. It's very word food for thought is the expression I was thinking of. There we are. Words to mull over for anyone looking to get into esports casting as a career. We're now going to go into the deep dive into what Toby's career is like as an esports caster and a bit more of some technical information on that. But before we do so, ladies and gentlemen, remember there is a Q&A session at the end of this interview. So make sure that you submit your questions in the chat so that we can have them verified, and hopefully Toby will be able to answer them for you. So talking specifically about what it's like to be a professional esports caster, then Toby, what is some of the work that you have to do off camera in terms of maybe preparation or before an event or reviews that you have to do after?
So that's always different depending on obviously the person. Like for me, like I've been doing Dota so long that I understand this like the back of my hand. You discover a new spot every now and then, but you pretty much know what's going on. Uh, so prep for me is more just like understanding the current form of teams, current form of players, and I think that they've been talking about. Understanding the game of Dota, like that's what I work with analysts to understand. Like I'm not
Hmm.
going to understand to their level. So what's the point of me pouring through like different stats and this and that? It's like it can be nice, but it's nowhere near as important as just creating what you need to do on a broadcast. So a play-by-play caster is all about the storylines. I think Capitalist, I think it's one of the best examples, and Saticist, I think are the
Hmm.
two best examples of play-by-play casters who really put storylines together so well. So if you want to learn, go and see how they actually do it. Um, yeah, so I would probably say those two. And that's kind of what you're meant to do. I like myself, like I'm more of the hype guy. I try and keep
Hmm.
things simple. I can't try and keep things like building up with momentum. So a lot of it is just making sure my body is prepared to go through what I put it through. Uh, so this is like voice. Make sure you don't go out karaoke the night before. Don't drink heavily before. Do it after. That's fine. Like just things like this, like have a good night's sleep the evening before. I make sure you're comfortable. One of the best things I think ever happened to talent is like whenever we travel now, we only sleep in our own hotel room. We don't share rooms
Nice.
because it's very important that you're able to switch off.
Yeah.
uh, so I don't have to talk throughout the night. And I don't have to worry about like what people are looking at me for and everything. I can literally just switch off and watch
Yeah.
some terrible 1990s TV show, and be like, okay, it's simple mind, simple life, and then you're refreshed, like you're ready to go the next day when it counts. And I think that's the best thing for a play-by-play caster because, like, if you're trying to cast games really quickly too, like if you're trying to see everything on the screen and you got tired eyes,
Yeah.
you're not going to see everything. If you want to be creative with the way you describe things, which actually sometimes sleeplessness can help with that. I at least for me, like my brain's a couple wires get loose and things get a little interesting. Um, but there's definitely like this, like you can't enunciate as well if you get tired. You'll
Yeah.
start to slur, and there's things like this. It's just like just mentally and physically, just be prepared for what you need to do as a play-by-play caster, and don't think that it's just something you could rock up and I'm great at it anyway. It's yeah, you're gonna get wrecked.
So even if you are somebody who thinks that they are, just great at it anyway, and they're just going to walk in and breeze it, what are some of the most challenging aspects that you encounter personally as a caster working on those esports broadcasts?
Challenging things is always going to be gaps.
Hmm.
Like especially for me, like I'm someone who's a very momentum based caster.
Yeah.
I think one of the best tournaments I got to cast was TI1 because I never stopped. I was the
Yeah.
only play by play caster for that entire thing. I didn't sleep much during that event, and I was fine with that because I was the one and only. Yeah. Uh, but when you turn up and you do a game and then you got to stop for 2 hours and then you got to come back and go again,
Yeah.
like that's the hard thing. Like that's when you need to be in your own space, and like the green rooms at events, like you don't get a lot of space uh there, and sometimes it's not really that comfortable either. So you're like, okay, well, yes, how do I just keep myself in this? And like I turn to energy drinks. Not gonna lie, that's probably the best thing I can do. Or I watch things on my phone, put in my headphones, or sometimes I just try and run the day through. Keep keep watching all the games on the screen, and just focus on the Dota. Like just keep the energy high. But I can tell you at the end of the day, I'll be very drained. I always said like in the early tournament days, uh, like if I wasn't actually passing out in the final day of the tournament, I haven't done my job right.
Yeah. Well, it's an incredible level of energy commitment as well. Obviously, especially perhaps uniquely in your case as one of the most hype play-by-play casters in the game. I can imagine it can be quite physically draining.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it really can be, especially as you get older. Like I'm
yeah.
turning I'm turning 35 in just over a month's time. Like I am an old fart when it comes to this scene.
Well, I'll not comment on that personally, but You mentioned energy drinks already. Are there any other ways that you cope with the high pressure environment? Does that get to you quite a lot when you're working on these events?
You just try and balance out what you need to do. Don't don't overcommit to things if you can avoid it. Like sometimes you'll have obligations that you need to do when you're at events,
Hmm.
but try and just like make sure you know when you need to do what and have energy. Like don't go out and stand in the crowd for 2 hours meeting people and then come back to your casting desk and think you're going to be fine. Because I can tell you it's not. It takes a lot of energy to stay out there and meet people all the time. Um, you just die. Like I see Slacks do it in 20-minute bursts. He goes out, then comes back, and then just like slumps in one of the chairs. He's just like, "How you doing there, man?" He's just like, "I feel terrible," and goes back out. It's like, "Hey guys," yeah. It's I don't know how he does it. That man's gonna kill himself.
Well, perhaps one of the only other people who could contest your level of high energy on those Dota 2 broadcasts, Toby, and especially in those crowd segments, I think. As you know, it just shows the diverse range of talent that you do actually have available in your esport. And I imagine that the internet can be quite critical of those talent members in your esports scene. How do you manage to deal with internet feedback and criticism?
So originally not well.
Hmm.
Like I had to deal with Australian criticism, which I can actually tell you is
Yeah,
it's nothing compared to the rest of the world. Because they don't hold anything back. And I actually quit casting for 6 months because I couldn't take it. Uh, and I was brought back into it thanks to a good mate of mine. So yeah, thanks for that to happen. And yeah, you kind of like people will always say like, "Oh, just ignore it." Like it's water
hmm,
off a duck's back. Like and the same type of people who say that, the same type of people who are like they're those teachers at school said like, "Oh, when you get bullied, just just ignore it. Like it's fine. They'll go away." Like or talk to them nicely and they'll be really confused. I that was actually advice I got when I was in high school. I was like, "What the
nice.
fuck are you talking about?" Like yeah, I didn't say that back then, but I do say it now. There's just it's a little delusional. Everything eventually gets through. Like there's no way you can
Yeah,
really like avoid that. And you try and cling on to the positives that are there. You encourage constructive people. So respond to people that you actually believe have done something that like have actually not just there to berate you.
yeah,
Um, but encourage those people because the more they talk, the better your life is going to be. Um, and when it comes to the other ones, try and just look at it from an angle of like, is there anything in this like communication that I'm like I can take?
yeah.
Like, is there like normally if someone's criticizing you for something, there's probably an element of truth to it. And
Hmm.
it's not self doubt if you're able to analyze what they've said, cut out all the swear words and everything else they have in there, like the offensive context, and just focus on what they put in there. Of course, there are some people who are just like they're gonna they're gonna fuck with you.
Yeah.
They're gonna absolutely fuck with you. Like I was having a real downtime when I was in Germany at one point, and there was an Australian guy who actually uh, he DM'd me on on my Facebook. Um, and basically said like how much of a I will censor this. It's like I can't use the words he used. How much of a bad person I am
Nice.
for leaving Australia high and dry. My family must mean absolutely nothing to me to move to the opposite side of the world. You have abandoned them. You have abandoned us, and you are ashamed. Like you, I hope your genetic line never continues.
You can
Uh,
almost taste the envy.
it's but it's just one of those things where like people like the element of truth is Australia did feel very abandoned when I left them. Like I
Yeah.
was the person who was running most of like the Australian Dota coverage at the time. And I moved to Europe and my company was doing European events and I was on a European time schedule. Like, so what am I gonna do? Like there's only so much you can still do. Like and it's hard. It's definitely hard. Um but just try and keep your life balanced. Make sure that like you have other good things in your life and other good people in your life that you can talk this kind of stuff through, have a drink with, and say, "All right, this is my issues right now.
Yeah.
Please listen." Like and that's it. Like that's I think that was the best relief for me.
Yeah, and I think that within that feedback from the community, at least some of it is bound to be constructive at some point. So if you can find that, I definitely think that that is a way to improve as a caster starting out. And what do you think that some of the other ways that newer casters can hone their craft and improve their skills if they've already started, working on volunteer broadcasts, for example?
So if you want to improve your casting, make sure you're getting the grassroots right. Like you
Hmm.
need your basic elements to be right. There's a long list of those, but self review is going to be where you need to start, as well as review of others. Look and see what other people do. Try and like watch a cast and say like, okay, this is that key thing this person's doing, and don't try and emulate it, but try and learn from it. Like you don't need to be a copy of every other caster that's out there, but you can learn from the things that they do well. And there's a simple thing you could do for that when you're watching something, ask yourself why you enjoy what you just heard.
Hmm.
And you'll probably find a lot of points just doing this. And you only need to focus on one at a time. But it's a good thing to do. And then, like, watch that and then watch yours, one after the other. And say, like, so why am I enjoying being a viewer of myself? And if your answer is no, then I think you got a couple of things to work on.
Yeah.
Um, and you, like, yeah, like the list is very, very, very long when it comes to that. But if you do the groundwork right and you just get this good self review going and you're able to learn from others, then it's a good way forward.
Yeah. And if you know that you're sat there as a newer caster starting out, you're doing these volunteer broadcasts, you're doing the self vod reviews, continually trying to improve yourself. What do you think is the best way for an aspiring caster to get noticed by a tournament organizer or something like that? What's the best way to try and transition from the volunteer space into paid broadcasts?
Okay, so first you want to actually know if you want to be noticed.
Hmm.
Are you ready to actually be noticed? Uh, it's a real hard thing, but like show a video to your mom or something and say like what do you think about this? And if she's just like, I don't get why you're doing this all the time, it's like then it's like, well, okay, maybe not good to be noticed because like you're gonna get reviews from every walk of life.
Yeah.
Uh and normally you only get one chance, one opportunity, in order to actually break into a game or into the scene or in general. And if you blow that, then you've got to spend just as much time as you probably have already spent repairing the damage you've done.
Yeah.
So make sure you're ready to first be noticed. Um, and then you need to be able to find something which is professional enough uh, to have something that you'd be proud to showcase. So this can be like a professional tournament, or it could be with a bigger group.
Hmm.
Like a LAN event is already a great thing for you. That's like showreel content. But like that's kind of where you should begin, like where you kind of take it from a bedroom cast to a professional cast,
Yeah.
and that's should be your first step when you try and get noticed. After that, everything else will fall into place if everything you've done beforehand is right.
So let's say then that you are in charge of a Dota 2 event and you've got to hire the broadcast talent for it, and you're looking through, a list of these student casters. What are some of the things that you're going to be looking for when selecting on-camera talent for the event?
Okay, so well, the simple thing will be for non-camera talent is you want to see a show reel.
Hmm.
You want to be able to see like what the person can do, but you also want to see what they think they can do. Most people don't think about this because they just pump a whole bunch of different things into their show reel because they thought they looked good on camera at that one point. But like if you've picked something where you're like, I'm an analyst and I'm sitting at a desk, and what you're talking about is something that's so stupid, I'm going to listen to the stupid. I'm not
Yeah.
going to think about like how good you look on camera. Uh, that's very low on my priority list. Um, so the clips that you choose should really reflect the type of person you think you are and the job that you want to go for. Don't write a CV for every single position on a camera on a talent list. Like if you're a play-by-play, then be a play-by-play. Showcase why you're a good play-by-play, but also showcase like how you can do things as a play-by-play caster.
Yeah.
Like if I just have 5 minutes of you screaming at me, like I'm not going to be interested. Very simply, like I want to hear dynamic. I want to hear different tones. I want to actually hear someone that's able to communicate with their co-caster. Like, don't think you're the only person that's on show here. Like, it's your synergy that you're able to create with everyone else that works as a talent. A talent is not a one-man crew. Um, and these are the things that I would definitely look for. And that's pretty much it. When it comes to talent, I sure you can show me a history of what you've done in the past, and unless it's a notable event, I'm probably not going to care so much.
Mhm.
Like, there's no qualifications going to help you on this. You book a talent for a talent. Like, what they will bring to my show, do they fit into the storyline that I want to do?
Yeah, this sounds it's definitely good insight to hear from the mind of somebody who works in the industry. Just what that whole selection process is, because I do think there are a lot of people obviously sat there, trying to assemble portfolios or demo reels and aren't quite aware of what the people actually recruiting are thinking about internally. So I think it's good
Yeah.
to get some insight on that from you.
Yeah, and every recruiter is going to be different, of course. Like,
Yeah,
some people are just like, I know a group, they hire people based on how many followers they've got and what's the exposure that will come from it. But I also know
yeah,
another group who will hire people because they really want them to synergize with the show they're going to do. I also know another group that just hires people because they're a Russian organizer and they just need to hire people
yeah.
because it was part of their conditions that they made with someone. So they're just like, all right, who have we got? That guy, he'll take 250 a day. Great. All right, we'll hire him.
Nice. Well, looking then at newer casters getting into the industry, are there any specific challenges or obstacles that newer casters can expect to face?
Competition will always be the biggest one.
Hmm.
I Who already exists in that position that you want to take? Like, unless you're getting into a new game, someone is already where you already want to go.
Yeah,
Um, and even if you want to get into like a game where no one's in it, everyone's wanting to go for it. Look at Valorant, for example. How many people on the day Valorant came out as an
yeah.
announcement changed their title to Valorant talent or Valorant commentator? Like, ugh. I, Everyone is jumping for this because the ease of access is never been easier.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, competition being the main challenge to look out for, then, guys. And before we head into the Q&A and hear what some of the thoughts you guys have and questions you have to ask Toby, I wanted to ask you if there was one final piece of knowledge that you could impart on the next generation of esports professionals. What would that be and why?
Ooh, that's a pretty big wide one too. Because when you say esport professionals, you're meaning a lot of different roles. Um, I think something that's very important if you want to be a professional in this industry is having a sense of reality of what is required, what is needed. Um, that's both like in the scene itself. So if a TO wants to hire you, why do they want to hire you? Like what is the role that you will fill by being there? Then this is both talent, like on camera, off camera. Um, what happens with like all the social media people as well? Like, why do you want to hire a social media person? Everyone has a Twitter and a Facebook, and they run their own Twitter and Facebook. But what puts you ahead of somebody else?
Yeah.
Like, what's your experience? What's your showcase? Like, like why do you do what you do, and why do you do it better than the other people that are around you? Like, I think that's something you need to be able to answer very, very clearly because you're only going to get 5 seconds to prove it.
Hmm.
You probably won't get much longer than that. It's what you always call the elevator pitch. You got
Yeah.
as much time as we're in the elevator, and I'm going one floor. We're not going more than that. It's one floor of an elevator pitch to get you through the door to somewhere else, and that's going to sing out more than anything. Like, you need to be able to prove that you know what you can do in a short span of time. And right now, there's not a great amount of ways to showcase that. Like, there's qualifications out there in the world which showcase that you can do something specific, but most esport people won't be hiring you for that.
Yeah.
Unless you have the first thing you look at is not what you studied. It's they'll look at what you've done. What's your experience? Show me that you can do the work that I'm hiring you for. I don't trust a piece of paper. I trust if you were taught, like if you were like a pupil of of a teacher that I respect, maybe I'd hire you.
Hmm.
Because that person would vouch for you by you being their student and passing you.
Yeah.
Like that's a big thing. Um, and that's where you kind of have your connection based off like like who respects who, like who knows who. Like that's the whole industries, right? Like it's not what you know, it's who you know. Kind of approach. So make sure you know a lot of people. Make sure you prove to a lot of these people as well that you can do what you can do, and not just words. Like, if you want someone that can BS for you, most of the time when it reaches a person who's going to hire, they'll call out the BS because
Yeah.
they'll know that this person is renowned for BSing. I know there's a couple of people out in the industry that I know full BSs. Um, but I also know they attract a lot of students, um, uh, like a magnet, because they're just like, oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, and I know person A and person B and person C. I've worked with ESL, I've worked with PGL, I know all these groups. Yeah, man, you're definitely gonna go far. Like they're the people that you avoid like the plague, because at the end of the day, if someone like that speaks up for you, you're actually worth less. Like your reputation is still connected to the people that you surround yourself with and who speak up for you. And if you have someone who just does this like a throwaway comment of just like, oh yeah, I saw that guy Ben Hodge. He was okay. Like he did a podcast and he asked okay questions. Like then that's that. But if someone's like, man, you should hire this guy to do your podcast series for your new show at ESL, I I'd be like, okay, so tell me why.
Yeah.
And if you can't answer that, then why are you going to get hired? I yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's a roundabout way to try and answer that, but
Yeah.
quite simply, just think about what you're presenting and who's presenting it, be it yourself or for you, like someone for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Make sure, I think if we could summarize that, make sure you can explain why you're good at what you do. And if you're going to have anyone vouch for you, make sure that that's the right person to be doing that. I think that's boiled down and summarized nicely into a piece of advice that leads us well into the final section of this Q&A, ladies and gentlemen. It is, of course, your viewer questions now for TobiWan. We are going to be taking them from the chat just throughout the live shows they've been going on. You've been sending them in. So the first one is from Dino, and he asks, when casting, how do you prevent yourself from using the same few crutch words and phrases? And what do you use to help develop your vocabulary and learn new phrases to stop the show from sounding repetitive?
Okay, before I answer this one, I want to go to the chat and say, like, actually ask brutal, interesting questions. Like you don't always have opportunities to ask very open-ended questions. I normally answer absolutely everything. So actually ask interesting things and not just some small things. But for the expanded vocabulary and avoid crutch words, so every person will have filler words. This is just something that's natural. People will use but, whatever, things like this. It will always fill up your vocab, and you'll always find yourself with some kind of filler word that will always return to you. Most of the time, you'll avoid filler words just by having interesting things to say and only talking when you have interesting things to say. If you try and talk all the time, you try and fill dead air because you just hate the sound of silence, which is a natural, fear, uh, you're going to find you're going to be using more filler words.
Yeah.
You're gonna construct sentences which are not well thought through with words of meaning, and instead they become words of fluff. So try and always have some kind of meaning to what you say when you say it. Creativity, now that's another thing. Like I remember I wrote up a lesson about this, and it came from something which is just so mediocre as an action in life. And I saw this video a long time ago. I wish I could actually find it again. I haven't been able to find it, but this is like back in 2004. I found this video, and it was a bunch of guys who would commentate cars parking,
Right.
and that's all it was. It's just like a shopping center and cars parking, and you realize that you have to look at the finer details, like and like they come in with tape measures and measure the distance of the wheel to the line. Like what is the actual angle as I look at this? Like this car is this wide compared to the bay, which is this wide. Oh, someone's trying to park with a trailer. This is an interesting thing. Like you find ways to make the bland interesting. And if you can start doing that, you'll probably find new and interesting ways of describing things. And just do it that way. Like, think of it as a way to describe things and less of like, oh, I need to be creative with this word. Most of the time, it's just a different perspective that people are looking for. Like,
Mhm.
if I call everything out by the same ability, it's like, nah, I'm not really that interested. But I remember these StarCraft guys came and cast Dota one time, and they'll describe what they were seeing on the screen. And it was like they called Nick's assassin armor bug, because he has armor on him and he looks like a beetle. Like, and this is just a different way you can look at a game and describe what is in front of you. So take small elements like that, combine it with what you know, and you'll find a lot of different ways to be creative.
There we are. The next question, also from Dino. When looking at opportunities within esports, what are some red flags that you can identify? I think perhaps, talking a little bit about if you've been given opportunities that perhaps look too good to be true, for example, or something like that. How can you identify red flags in those scenarios?
Well, most of the time you can do your own homework. Google's a great thing. So you can find out like who's running what and why. Uh, like most of the time you can also track down like what's their revenue model? Like why do they make money?
Hmm.
Do they make money because they just abuse volunteers, or do they make money because they're part of the government? Do they make money because of X, Y, Z? Because they actually run a good show. I think of the positive. Um, so just do your homework on on who you're going to be working with, be it the individuals, be it the organization. Most of the time after then, you could make your own decisions about like if it's a good group or not. The only other red flag I'd flag is if you are used as a volunteer, make sure you're getting something out of it. Not everything has to be monetary. Working as a volunteer is something that, like, if you work with a group which has like a good reputation, it's that perfect thing I said before, like it's experience that you can put on your list
Hmm.
that can get you into the job you actually want. That is a paid position. That is a full time position. Working as a contractor is good. There's a lot of different areas you can probably get jobs for this, but I just make sure you always get something out of what you're doing. Uh, be it something that sets you up for the future or sets you up for the now.
Good, good advice to impart on anybody looking to take any volunteer positions. The next question then from Melvin Izzle. When researching for a cast, what is your process for finding stats, points, or anecdotes that you can use for narratives in the game?
Yeah, we kind of covered that one a little
Hmm.
bit before. Because a lot of it is just like it's the prep for what you want to bring to the show.
Hmm.
So most of the time, like I get to use like there's a site called Dota Buff, which has most of the information I'm looking for, or Wikipedia, which has all the tournament results. So yeah, you can't just dig out of there and just make the connections yourself. And you can actually hire people as well that will build up your storylines for you. I- they don't get paid much, but I know some people have like for TI9 that people pumped in like 150 pound just to have a sheet of a whole bunch of different storylines for different games, and they would update it every day.
All right.
It was
Oh, there we
yeah,
are. A little
it,
niche market, perhaps people might not be aware of there.
yeah. You won't get paid much for it. Like
Yeah.
you really won't, because most people who want that, people who are not at the top of their game.
Yeah.
It's B tier casters who don't have a lot of money to work with in the first place.
Hmm. Well, there we are. Covered that a little bit earlier then. Hopefully that answers a bit of your questions about the research before a broadcast. The next one is from Finn the Human 998, and they ask, has there ever been an issue regarding someone on camera having an accent slash dialect? As someone
Yes.
whose first language isn't English, I sometimes find it hard trying to understand certain accents.
Yes. Yes. Quite simply, like I know a guy who will never cast the main stage of TI in an English-speaking country because he's from Southeast Asia. And the simple thing is his accent is not clear enough when you put it through a PA.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like you have to think about the consumer. It's not about if the guy is fantastic or knows what he's talking about. Uh, it's about if you can be understood by the people who are consuming you. And if you think that like you're not good enough with your English accent, like Red Eye's a great example of this. Like he completely retrained the way he talks, so he is very very clear with the way he enunciates and the way he talks. Um, and it's just simple vocal lessons. Like, don't expect people to just accept you because you think you're quirky with an accent, or that you've worked really hard. Like, that doesn't fly. Like, we talked about competition before. Like, if people are
Yeah,
gonna like step up and say like, "I want to be hired for this role," and you're stepping up saying, "I want to be hired for this role," if I sit there and say, "Oh, well, I can understand you, but I can't understand you," that's it. Like
yeah,
there's no more discussion after this point. Um, so if you really want to be in a broadcast position, then you need to be able to speak the language clearly. But in saying that, actually having an accent is a good thing. It's this tinge you have that makes you easier to listen to for hours on end.
hmm
So you probably notice there's a lot of Australians out there because we have this kind of like tang
yeah,
to most of the stuff that we say. Like there's a lot of British broadcasters out there because you've kind of just got that old classic kind of tone to voices. Um, and this is good. And Americans have the American tone, but there will always be like different flavors of tones.
yeah,
So a lot of the American casters, you listen to them and it's like, I'm listening to Major League Baseball today. It's like, oh, okay, great. But like for a long period of time, you get really pissed off hearing that accent
yeah,
because it's like a nasal ring that just echoes in your ears, and you're like, can you not just tone it down a little bit? And then they scream at you louder, like in the typical like, "Are you ready for this hype?" And it's like, just God, stop! Like that's and if you grow if you watch like a lot of like American movies, American actors in this, you probably are used to it as well. So when you hear something different, you're like, oh my god, is that a Danish accent? Oh wow, like that's where you get your like your unique flavor. That you then combine with your unique words, your unique approach, and your whole unique image to be unique.
yeah. So sounds like accents a good thing to have as long as you can enunciate properly in the language that you want to be casting in. The next question then from the Dork Seer. He asks, how do you
Nice
voice
name.
prep just before a cast?
Sorry. What was the question?
That's all right. It is a pretty good name, all things considered, to be honest. The question was, how do you do vocal preparation just before a cast?
I don't. I really don't. Like I did the whole musical theater crap of like ha 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 ha, like warm up your whole voice. But I really just stopped doing that. Like I just let things kind of flow now because I think my voice gets pushed that far.
hmm
I think the only thing you really do is you think about it's like just how hard are you pushing your voice? Like are you starting to like damage your throat by doing what you're doing? And that
Yeah.
happens a lot for newcasters because they scream, they don't project. And the second you do
hmm
that, you will destroy your voice. You will not get through a couple of hours of casting.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you personally that you can get a sore throat from talking for extended periods of time, let alone casting and screaming in front of an entire stadium. And I can imagine that that puts a lot of pressure on your vocal cords.
It really does.
Finally, then, our last question is from X Kirby, and they ask, when is the next season of Well Played?
Oh, there's a York student right there. Yeah, it's. I would like to do it again. I really, really would. I learned a lot of lessons from that, but the budget required to do something like that is quite high. So if there is a television studio that is willing with staff and people to put all this on, and then we can find a couple of sponsors to actually pay talent to come and be part of this, then maybe we can run it again. But until then, like crazy thing is, I think we spent like I think we spent £80,000 uh just making that trial season.
Flipping hell.
And to do it properly, you probably have to spend about 150K.
Yeah.
I yeah, and that kind of money, it's yeah, I don't have that lying around just yet. But hey, if someone wants to burn that, maybe they can also fund my project as well as that one.
Well, the open call is out there to any of the York students listening. If you've got that funding available, you can make it happen. But that
Yes.
does.
Do we have any lords out there? Lords, lords
Yeah.
with money, or just lords with
Any,
no money? Okay, never
Any
mind.
blue blood royalty in the chat? willing to throw a donation, we'd love to see it. But that does throw us straight to the end of today's program then, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Toby, thank you personally so much for joining us. I feel like you've imparted a wealth of knowledge onto everybody today. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we wrap up the show?
Just stay positive no matter what gets thrown your way. Please do check out my my academy project. We're looking for a lot of people to come over sometime soon. We're almost launching. But it's still a very bare site right now. But yeah, register over there and keep an eye out on what we're doing, and spread it around all your student networks, because a lot of this is really for students.
Indeed. And if you do want more of these student resources and follow more of these talks that give you insights into those industry positions, then please do make sure to follow us on Twitter at Insights Esports, all one word there. That's at Insights Esports. And I'm sure the link will have been put in chat at some point. Other than that, the last thing to say is a final thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll see you all in the next broadcast.